we're making fun of your new stethoscope because I was paying attention to that at the last episode. I'm like, yo, what the fuck is going on
You like?
with your headphones? What is this?
No, the old ones used to hurt my ear when I get these new glasses. This is one of the joys of getting old, guys. Sorry.
These delicate ears. Get some
But I
fucking
can actually
earpods,
hear
bro.
you now. And that's a good segue to introduce episode 80 of the Three Body Problem. I don't know what we'll call this episode. There's not a lot of news to get to. But unless I
There's
don't
not
know.
a lot of news to get to.
There's not a lot of like real the
Really?
traditional news, but we dragged our buddy Hamid Kashfi back on the show this week. By the way, Hamid, I know we mentioned it in the last episode, but your previous appearance on the Three Body Problem was by far the most listened to episode. So in our quest to shamelessly whore
horror.
ourselves
And
out for some more traffic, we brought you back this week. Thanks for joining the show again. Listen, in the United States here, there is some stuff happening in Iran around some protesting, around some economic conditions and shopkeepers shutting the stores down. But it's a page 2, page 3 story. And this is Friday, January 9th. Can you kind of give us a sense of what's going on in Iran at that very, very high level?
What
No.
the fuck is happening? What the fuck is happening?
No, I
Hamid?
can't. Thank you very much for having me again on the podcast, and thank you for the update about the podcast and the history of like the episode that you mentioned. It was super interesting for myself as well, so I appreciate everyone who tuned in, and thanks again for having me. But back to the thing, what's going on in Iran? We were just talking to Juan and yourself that it's so much going on and constant updates and so much bullshit and so much fabricated news, so much PR going on and propaganda that even for someone who actively tracks media, knows what to look for and can figure out more or less what's bullshit, what's real news, it's a headache to dig through everything. So I can't imagine for someone who's not familiar with the context or with the culture even, or have updated news, figuring out what's going on, it's a big mess. But to give it a very, very short recap, as you said, like in the bazaar and basically the private industry, they started like mild protest and they closed shops basically to express their anger towards sudden jump and spike in the inflation and specifically increase of the decrease of value of the Iranian real, because
This was what, over like a month ago?
about 3 weeks ago. Yeah. So the government's agenda was to do an economical surgery, as they call it, to adjust the prices and inflation. And part of that was increasing the price of the US dollar in the market, like in the streets at the exchange hand. And that was a drastic spike and increase. And I think over past month, it has increased almost 20 some percent, which is unusual. And it has also hit record high ratio for, I think, as long as it has ever been tracked. So I don't know the latest one, but the day it started, basically all these protests, and a week before that, there was already a 5% increase. And according to their own official or unofficial, I don't know, I haven't been really tracking and digging that side of the economics and statistics from the government, but there has been about 50% inflation year to year increase, which is insane. And if we put it in context, salaries, I think at best they increase 15%. So you can imagine people are getting more poor by month. And I would say a big chunk of the population are struggling to get their basics sorted out, let alone having a proper life or so the poverty line, as the government has defined it, based on their own numbers from, I think, 1 year ago or so, it was already 65% were below it based on their own official records, which is usually very optimistic, and they play with the numbers to make it look like. So it's not a pretty situation, and you can imagine why people are protesting as well. the inflation and these price changes triggered it, but we all know that this is not the whole reason. And a lot of people are basically tired of the government. And these are just sparks for flaming something that has been already in the air for many years. And in previous protests as well, people have been trying to express their anger and unsatisfaction towards the government. And this is again another round. This is probably not going to be the last one. It's not the first one. So I'm honestly not expecting something to magically happen overnight or over a week, but it's one more step towards the direction that people are hoping to achieve. And I think every time something like this happens, there is a good chunk of effort and pollution, I would say, getting involved with the like legitimate protests and movements of the people, which is funded, sponsored by, or motivated by like foreign nations, as they should be using the opportunity to jump on the same train and like achieve whatever agenda that they have. So not all of it like should be perceived as like pure movement, pure content media. That's why I was at the beginning saying that it's hard to dig through the bullshit, because
Right.
a lot of stuff are happening. People are unfortunately literally getting killed by hour and by day. And the last I remember, I think yesterday, the toll was about 40 people, 25 of them confirmed identities. So this is serious. And as much as both sides try to paint this picture that these are exaggerated news, these are like bloated numbers, this is not as bad as it is, or as good as it is, depending on which side of the table you're sitting. There is a huge movement going on, and there are huge protests going on in every street, in every city, smaller ones, bigger ones. It actually started from smaller cities, which is contrary to the previous case, which like capital and like other big cities were the big players. This time it has been more severe in smaller towns in the country, some cities that people have never heard of their names
That's
before.
usually really telling, right? Like
Yeah.
that's when you know that would be the dream for like an external destabilizer, because in a lot of other countries, as far as I'm aware, it's when you see that groundswell of smaller sort of seemingly coordinated, uncoordinated groundswell of smaller regions actually popping up is when you start to see like true instability in the system.
Yeah, it doesn't seem as coordinated as the previous cases because, well, I think part of it is because it's the second big round in recent years. The other thing is people were already kind of primed because of the previous round. So not everything needed to be done from scratch, not all the trainings, all the information that needed to be exchanged. People were still warmed up from the previous round of protests, which is good. But when you look at it from distance, you don't see as much, I would say, organization or steering going on as you would normally see. Either they have got better at hiding it in plain sight, or it's actually pure, genuine movement by the people that doesn't really need that much steering. So I'm lost in parsing that as well myself. So I have no clue, and I'm not an expert on that part.
I mean, to steer into that a little bit, right? And tailing off of the last episode, which we were very heavily focused on, cyber and obviously the war that followed with Israel. How much it was that whole 12-day situation
A precursor.
how much of that is the like a domino or the domino in this situation? Like, of course it's going to have an effect, but are we saying like, yeah, how much of this would you attribute to that happening
Great question.
versus just where Iran has been in the past 6 months or whatever?
This was exactly the reason I mentioned that looks a little bit more pure and more like genuine compared to the previous one, especially when you look at the outsider elements trying to push things or steering things or plant ideas in people when they are like broadcasting information and news. Of course, every news agency out there has their own agenda, and I think pure, honest journalistic updates when it comes to these situations is rare and it's uncommon, sadly. And that's a reality that we are in right now. Like every different news agency, depending on their country, depending on the state that's supporting and funding and sponsoring them, try to push their own agenda and highlight different aspects of similar cases. So is every time there has been protests in Iran. So you cannot and you should not blindly rely on and read into what BBC,
This is not
Iran
unique to Iran
International,
either.
Deutsche Welle, I don't know, Fox News, whatever news that's like spreading updates. There is a little bit of play involved in each of these when they are distributing or upstreaming what's being provided to them. But going back to Juan's question, I think it's more genuine, mostly because, interestingly so, you are not seeing as much active involvement of even activist groups like Adalat Ali, I don't know, Sparrows or whatever that we used to observe, and we actually saw them suddenly getting engaged and active and proactively pushing stuff, pushing content, providing details.
Yeah.
I have not seen much of that happening. If anything, it's more like soft messages going through in their Telegram channels and updates that, hey, we support the movement, blah, blah, that everyone does on their like public facing media.
Wait,
That's
I think
super interesting.
But wait,
Sorry,
but
Ryan,
before
go
we
ahead,
get
go ahead.
there, I
Yeah,
wanted
yeah.
to just piggyback on Juan's question because I think it was another question. You're saying it feels more organic this time. I think Juan's question was more since episode 51 when you came on. What date was this? That was in June. On June 20th, right? From June to now, is there been a single precipitating factor that triggered this economic collapse, or has that, or how much of this kind of slow drip economic collapse was precipitated by the 12-day war and all the activity around what happened then, the bombing, the U.S. getting involved, and all of that stuff? Was there is it a natural trickling down from the war that we're here, or was there something that happened a month ago that the shopkeepers start closing their stores because of the inflation? Like, what is?
Well, inflation is a big thing on its own, but beside inflation, I don't recall anything major and notable that would have kind of suddenly triggered this. But people have been unhappy even since or even before the war. So,
Right.
like I wouldn't really put this in the same basket as the 12-day war. Or unsatisfaction because of that war or whatever was
Or the
surrounding
previous
it.
protests that
I
was
would
shut
connect
down.
it more to the previous protests, right? Like the war was an anomaly and like a big unprecedented set of events that happened in a short span of time with short span of effect. I wouldn't really get too much into trying to connect it to what's going on right now for various reasons. And you can actually see that like in the way those elements active during that war are not as much active right now in terms, as I was just example, like Adalat Ali, for example, during that war, during those period, they published that infamous list of CCTV cameras, which was actually places to raid and get yourself armed. I honestly was expecting something very similar or even resurfacing the same thing, because this is literally like, I was thinking to myself this morning that they actually, if they had an intention to genuinely help people to reach that government change or government overthrow agenda that was active or was being pursued during the war, during the 12 days war, now and today would have been the right time to drop that list and a map collection, not during the war. Who gives a fuck during the war? People are getting bombed and they try to shelter and save their asses. Nobody's like coming to streets to protest about anything. That's a wartime. You don't do that. Now and today is the time to do something like that, which oddly, they have been, all of these channels, if you observe, they have been delivering soft messages. And full disclosure, I haven't been really actively and in an up-to-date way tracking and reading every single one of them because I've been busy doing some other stuff, which we'll talk about. But I didn't see anything popping up in the news that, well, this group published this or this group published that. Contrary to that, on the Iranian side, this Hanzala group started publishing some like new hacked and dumped content from Israeli side phone devices that they are trying to piggyback on. That's probably like unrelated to subject of this episode, but the Iranian side has been more active than the Israeli or other nations' side when it comes to mixing up cyber with what's going on in the street. And to put a lid on this question and wrap it up, yeah, I didn't see much active participation to aid people, actually, rather like do something, provide something useful that would help people in a good way. Or, for example, even activities that would involve, as they were promising like the last time, to suppress the anti-riot entities in the government. Like the previous time, they literally bombed the building that was being used to take detainees, and like when they were arresting people, they would take them to a very specific location in Tehran, at least, and that building was targeted. This time, you don't see much activity around similar things. Like if I was a nation state and if I was planting this and if I was trying to steer into this, I would, for example, actively engage with blinding the government or blinding the IRGC or counterintel services or whatnot to prevent them or block them from watching people, tracking people. You're not seeing that. Or we will talk about it later on a little
Costin. One second, Juan. Let me bring Costin here because we're 15 minutes in and I haven't heard his voice yet. Is this a big story in Europe? Is this like the number one story in your, like, whatever your CNN is there?
No. Actually,
they have
it's
CNN.
It's like you said, we have Euronews. We have BBC, we have those kind of things. And we were joking right before the show. Ryan was saying he's watching Al Jazeera. I was checking Al Jazeera, but they were talking about Syria, other things. So actually, I wanted to ask Hamid, where does he get his news about Iran? Is it on X? Is it Al Jazeera? Where do you find news about what's happening in Iran?
Because Hamid, you're in Europe as well, right? You're based in Europe.
I have some sources. No, joking aside, I follow social media, but not in a random way. I have like different lists that I have been preparing or collecting over the years. So it's not something I suddenly decide to do. So if I want to tune into what's going on in the cyber world, I already have basically a tailored feed of updates of sources that I think are pushing interesting stuff. I have some technical sources that are not to be spoken of. I have been following a couple of news agencies like BBC, Iran International, Deutsche Welle, and some not because I trust them, because I have a couple of different sources that I can compare with each other and basically look at the discrepancies and see if something happens in all of them, it means it's more
legit.
likely to be legit news. If there is like a specific interest or a specific focus on certain subject by one and the other two are not talking about it, then you kind of feel that there is a hidden agenda behind.
Where does the average Iranian get their news from? Like your special case, obviously.
Do they get news?
Search trenches. One.
Right now they are blinded. Like
there is always a place though. There's always that place where people can reliably go find out something. Is that happening?
The coffee shop?
There's a huge favor towards Telegram channels, and Iranian people have been historically lazy in terms of reading and picking up what they have. So most of people's like short-term communications and updates usually channel through Telegram, and that's where they get each other updated. So, and there's a lot of unreliable stuff in that as well because there's no control over that. So it's a chaos.
But Hamid, sorry to interrupt you, but do any of these still work when the internet is down in the country? Like Telegram is still working, or is there any source that still works when the internet is dead?
Mostly no, but the internet, as like Cloudflare or others are painting it, it's not 100% dead.
Okay, so fill us in on that part of it. What's going on with the internet?
So yeah, if we want to wrap it up and like very quick technical overview of the situation right now, in like Iran has been investing in this what we call filter net or domestic big WAN that they label as internet. They have been investing on it for many years, over 10 years to 15 years. And the way it's supposed to work in days exactly like today is that they have been pushing and trying to steer all the private sector and the government sector to have a copy of their systems or their main systems operating from local and domestic data centers. So nothing unnecessary is routed outside of the territory of the country, technical and physical. And by that, it means they are controlling two important basically aspects of the traffic flow. One is in cases like today, they have complete control over shutting down internet access while maintaining some reasonable operational, maintaining some systems operational that are being used locally, like banks, government offices, and everything. If they cut routing like over the borders to Europe and US, nothing will really happen. Like applications, websites, and everything supposed to work. The other thing is they had this concern about the security of their content and their data and net flow leaving the country, which is of course every second agency's dream to like squat on them and watch them and tap cables and whatnot. You know the drill. That would supposed to also limit that aspect as well. So from that perspective, they have been marginally successful, but they have been leaking by other means, as we have seen all of these cyber attacks against them. But when it comes to cutting the internet off, right now the way things are structured is that every major system, every like government entity, supposed to or expected to have local and domestic hosted systems, and then they can just over 1, 2, or 3 single gateways, national level gateways, they can literally flip the switch and nothing routes outside of the country, and still things will work and continue working. So from outside world's view, you see everything suddenly going dark, but inside things are still working more or less. And that includes some domestic news. They include some
very filtered and controlled
messaging. Yeah, I mean, if it's there, it's working. And some like instant messaging applications that, of course, have been developed. But when it comes to reaching from inside the country during these situations or during these outages outside, the trick that some people have been playing, and it's still working to a degree, is that they can't completely cut off internet because some stuff will depend on it no matter what, and cutting it up 100% will cause disruption, as it is doing today. So there are a few data centers, there are a few like entities that still have functional internet access. And what people have been doing were basically using these data centers, using these VPSs or systems as a medium to channel their traffic to the outside world. So piggybacking over different protocols, piggybacking over different applications, like the typical like C2 channels that we know in the offensive world that you use to exfiltrate your data. People are literally doing that right now for on daily basis to get access to the internet. And even that one has been suppressed and blocked as of yesterday to a great degree, as far as I know. Like good time to shout out to Silas for helping and always be present and available for helping this stuff. We did something interesting, and I was curious to see in cases like this that are presumably 100% dark and outage, what's available and visible from Iran. And the list that we came up with was less than 200 IP addresses. So that's why I also tweeted something earlier today that if you're in the business of tracking live hosts and assets on internet, like Census, Shodan, and services like that, you must be collecting every hour, round over round, and log everything. Because if you see anything online and responding during this specific period of time, which is a rare golden opportunity to collect, it's something definitely worth looking into and digging up. and better so if you can do it right away, because it's not going to last probably. So that's why I was trying to stress and spread the word out there that if you can do it, please, and document it. If you don't want to publish it, that's fine. Just document the shit and keep it for yourself, but do it now, because later it's going to be very useful information to look at and analyze from many different aspects. And one other thing was the Starlink, which is usually the starlight of the situations. Apparently, they also flipped the switch and made it free, available for Iranians. I've been talking to a couple of friends inside the country that have it set up and running, and it's working. But interestingly, at least in like bigger cities, there's extreme amount of jamming or noise being blasted over the frequency. So even Starlink is struggling to stay connected with a reliable link. And part of that, as I heard and understood, I haven't done technical verification myself, but this explanation makes sense that because jamming Starlink itself is very difficult and challenging technically, they have kind of optimized it, and they are jamming the GPS signal. And when you jam the GPS signal on a Starlink router, it cannot lock in, and it affects the stability of the connection. So even if you're stationary at a fixed location, because of having poor GPS connectivity, you're going to have a lot of dropouts.
How is their Starlink there, though? I mean, those are people who smuggled devices in? Like, okay.
Usually at, like, of course, bloated prices, and all in occasions almost double
the beauty of black markets.
Yeah, I mean, people are making money out of it, but it's still
is it
not
widespread, though, or is just a handful of folks scattered around?
Hard to say, because people, of course, don't want to talk about it for obvious reasons. But also,
it's not something you can hide, though, right? It literally has to be a physical device staring at the sky.
Yeah, I mean, there are ways. Let's not discuss
There's
it.
Always ways. Yeah.
Yeah, but people have been doing it, and it's been active. And I have not heard cases where they would actively go and pursue people with Starlink and like basically like raid their home or something like that. There might be cases, I don't know. I haven't personally heard anything like that. And I have seen efforts to do research on how to actually track the technology and what you can get out of it, but nothing interesting so far out of it that would be usable for Iranian government to use it. There might have some capability, of course, we don't know, but I haven't at least seen active operations going after people like they used to do for satellite dishes for TV many years ago, that they would literally land on people's roof and like smash dishes and go into people's apartments and like drag things out and damage things and come out. They used to literally do that, but I have not heard cases about Starlink yet. So whoever is smuggling them into the country, please do more of it, as people are relying on it. And I also did something like more like a proof of concept thingy of an idea to how to use the Starlink. Like if you basically have a Starlink connection set up in the country, I prepared something on GitHub that it's a short guide, technical guideline of how to distribute access to your Starlink over cellular network to other people. So it's basically the same concept that I explained. You pipe your Starlink to a VPS in the country, and other people can VPN to that computer and then gain access to internet. Or you can just do it yourself if you want to keep it private for yourself. But that's one way to connect to internet, even right now that everything is supposedly dark. And it's useful because even the Iranian websites will be accessible this way. The whole idea is basically relying over mesh-based VPN implementation. So you connect one node to internet over Starlink, and then every other node that on the same mesh VPN will be able to access internet through the Starlink connection as well. That's the ballpark of it. And beside that, what else? The other interesting observation, well, maybe I mentioned it, and if you want, we talk. Otherwise, we push it later on, is the fact that despite all of these outages and systems not working, what's interesting is that there are a couple of systems centralized visual monitoring of citizen in the country. that despite all the other systems being down and not working, those systems are still up and running and happily serving people that it's supposed to serve, which is a very
Can you
telling.
expand a little bit on what those systems are, like the surveillance camera systems?
Yeah, so I'm not going to go into too much details, but there are like centralized security systems that was being enforced by the government a couple of years ago. SAPTOM, it's if you basically own a shop or you're a private sector and you want to install a CCTV camera, it should follow some specific standards and requirements, and the government was mandating the private sector to follow that and get approved for that and distribute their own camera and set up a system for that. Think of it like Amazon Ring, but managed and executed by a government entity. And Blink Blink, I was warning about it like a couple of years ago. It's happening already that they have been literally using that to watch what's going on in the street. So the fact that it's, despite all the situation and shitty internet, that system is still up and running and working fine, tells...
Are they the only people who own it?
Yeah, that's a part we don't talk about.
Let me ask a question before Juanito goes. Does this one feel different? Because I feel like every cycle there's a protest movement. Sometimes it gets repressed harshly. Sometimes it kind of peters out. There's some involvement of external actors. You says this one feels a lot more organic. Does it feel different? Does it feel different in a way that is headline making?
Sorry, was a question for me or for Juan?
Yeah, for you.
I don't know shit, dude. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about.
No, for someone plugged into the ecosystem, does this one feel different to you? Or are you rolling your eyes and saying in a month, yeah, this is going to pass and we're going to be back to square one?
I mean, I'm optimistic, but not as much as probably some listeners and Iranians would expect me to be. But I'm trying to be unbiased here and not take sides for the sake of having proper judgment. I would, of course, love for this to continue and go to the point that the government is no more or the fuckers in charge are no more. But we have to consider a lot of realities and things happening beside this event as well. And if we look at everything from like a big picture, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is a big step forward, but I don't think this is going to be magically it to wrap things up. It is certainly different. Another aspect that makes it a little bit different than the previous cases is the way people are being suppressed actively. In the previous case, they literally brought machine guns loaded over trucks, shooting at people in south of Iran, which is a horrific thing to even imagine. Like a heavy artillery, like machine gun being used against like unarmed protesters. That's a fucking massacre. There's no joke about that. But this time, for some reason,
you're noticing restraint?
This time they started, or they claim, or they pretended to be the case that they started a softer suppression of protesters. And they are telling that we are hoping to be as soft as possible against protesters until it crosses a line which they consider the national security. That's at least on paper what they claim. In reality, still, we are seeing people getting shot and getting killed in the streets. And of course, it takes time to verify all those cases, but that's the reality that's happening. But even so, I'm hearing from like friends in the streets that it's actually an interesting connection to the internet outage. In the previous case, and I also tweeted this morning myself, that usually it's a sign that something very nasty is gonna go down in the streets because of the outage, because they don't want the world to see. This time, at least one take on this approach was interesting, and I think worth thinking that this time, of course, part of it is going to be that. So they're gonna have some aggression towards the people, and there's going to be active anti-riot, like police doing the shitty things that they do. That's inevitable. But this take was telling basically that they make it dark, so people think this is going to happen again. So there's a fear factor and there's a deterrence factor on its own. But in reality, maybe they don't want people to see that they are going softer against protests. Because for some cities, like in Tehran and Mashhad in particular, when you look at the footage, like there are like 4-lane wide streets that are fully packed with people and cars. And according to the people in the video, this is unheard of and unseen even in the previous case. So the scale is certainly growing, but the aggression is not growing as much as last case. So if we say for every increased day of protests, the aggression would increase by 10%, based on what I've been perceiving, it's not as much. I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I don't know. But at least this is another way to look at this outage. So perhaps the reason is not necessarily dark to a percentage. Could be that they, for the sake of their own, I think, longevity and staying in charge as long as possible, they don't want to. They basically want people to blow off some steam and let it out in a little bit more controlled way, without letting it go too dark, in a sense of like killing people. But they don't want the world to see that. That could be one reason.
So with that, you're kind of leaning into where my thinking has been, which is so I admittedly have this bias, and I for years, and I'm trying to work through it, which is I get excited by the promise of change because a situation that's familiar is boring, so like sorry to like minimize the effects on people and everything. It's very real, but as an analyst, right, being on the other side of the planet, right, seeing the same thing feels kind of depressing. So I can tell that I have this bias where when I see something change in a shitty situation, in a place where like people are clearly unhappy, I want to believe that this is it. And every single time I want to believe that this is it, right? You see some shit going down in Russia and you're like, oh, thank God, like this is going to be the one that does it. So like I'm admitting this bias. I have to admit this bias to myself in order to like not get too suckered by my own desire to believe. At the same time, I think it's really interesting to see the convergence of material changes and conditions in this situation as an outsider, in right, like your military might has been shown to be sorry, I say your, right, like the regime's military might has been shown to be kind of a farce, right? All the money went into building yourselves up in this ridiculous way where you could project power. Didn't work that way. Didn't work that way with Hezbollah on the outside. It doesn't work that way internally. Doesn't work that way with the missile program. Then financially, you're in disarray. Then in cyber operations might not be the most important thing, but a lot of the attacks on the banks and whatnot, I think, create a sense of insecurity that's very different than just there was some ransomware or somebody tried to slow down nuclear ops, nuclear development. So those convergences actually make me interpret Adalat Ali stepping back, Predatory Sparrow stepping back, almost as a statement of faith that something is different. Because what I will say, and this is something that we kind of realized, I think I'm going to guess even the Israeli government realized in the last one in June, which is if this is the time that the Iranian regime collapses, the one thing that will sour that victory is being seen as the person holding like the hot potato at the moment the music stops. I'm mixing like 1,000 metaphors, but like I'm just saying, like if this is the moment it finally collapses, you don't want to be the one shown to have had your hand on it causing it. For this to be truly successful and not just create a new state that continues to perpetuate this view of Israel as its enemy, the last thing you want is an Israeli hand to be very heavily pushing the
But
levers.
they're not sitting this out. There's no way they're sitting this out, though. I mean,
I don't, dude. Like, I'm not saying that they definitely are sitting it out, but I think that you can see a change in disposition, which means a change in like operational imperatives in some of, at least on the cyber elements, right? Adelat Ali had been pushing left and right. There were the TV things calling for revolution, the posts on Instagram, Telegram, Twitter, revealing corruption and all this stuff. And it was a constant stream. They were on Twitter. They would like harass people from the government and like put all this like things that sort of showed that they had insider knowledge somehow. Like, it was clearly kind of trying to play some of the psychology of the situation, whether good or bad. I mean, Hamid will be able to speak much more competently as to whether it was convincing or it was successful or it was useful. But just trying to determine like the operational tempo and disposition of the folks on the other side, I think it's really interesting to see a moment of like criticality, and for these groups that have been trying to heavily push for that scenario to pull out instead of leaning in.
I mean, do you think they're sitting it out completely? I know you mentioned they're not leaning in and actively visible, but what do you imagine is going on?
My short answer is that the absence of something, as I think you guys would worded it before in some episode, like the absence of this activity is a sign on its own. Because if it's too silent, it's telling. If it's very aggressively, as Juan was mentioning, pushing and pumping, that's something. Like, it's not the typical daily activity that we are observing right now. It's either too little or too much. Both of them could contain a message. But to Juan's point, I think it's also, if we consider the much longer term operational activities of these groups, it's perhaps time to consider that it might be the harvesting season. So they have been gradually pushing, sabotaging systems, breaking down things. Like there are a couple of incidents, for example, that I don't think we have been openly talking about it. For example,
talk about it openly.
I mentioned, I think in the group we talked like the Venezuela going dark as supposedly like a cyber operation. Everyone is like shook about it and they consider it interesting. There has been very similar attempts, at least, or propositions during the Iran-IL war as well, which I documented, but there was an Excel sheet that I posted online short after the war that I was trying to track all rumors, not necessarily confirmed, all rumors that collect these major cyber-related activities to the war. And one of it was a redacted line. It's still mostly redacted, but I can tell now that it was an effort that was identified as planting access into the core networking of the grid of the system, or the basically organization that manages and can literally flip switches on power distribution across the country. So if you have control over there, you can literally flip the switch, just like what people observed in Venezuela. You could do it. They claim, or as far as I could dig it up, they failed at identifying the source or ground zero. So they contained the situation basically, and it remained unspoken of for obvious reasons, even internally. But I think it's an interesting point to consider that this has been on the table as well. Had it become necessary to pull the plug or switch off the lights, this time it could be as well. But this goes back to like Juan's point that there has been a lot of efforts in the past, and some of them are cyber, some of them are like psyops, for example, that have been trying to plant ideas, steer people into different directions, cause tension, cause expectations from people, like push expectations into people's mind to have from the government. And basically, in a day like this, everyone would remember, though, over past 2 years, there has been a lot of issues with delivering of electricity. Like water supply in a big city in Tehran is as bad as a village in the middle of nowhere in Africa, that they cut water out and they stop serving water like every fucking day practically for a couple of hours in Tehran, in a fucking capital of a country of that big. That on its own, that's a big thing to consider. Price changes, which could be attributed to the war and like sanctions, of course. Like when the US sanctions a country or Iran, I don't think their main agenda or their only agenda is to just block some wallets and block some bank transactions from bigger corporations into the government's pocket. Part of it could be playing a long game of causing tension in the country, causing unsatisfaction among people that gradually will build up and over time will reach to a point that it will overflow, and people will just say enough is enough, and they end up in the streets like they are right now. So I think it's good to consider all of these little points as well, and not all of it is cyber, not all of it is related to short-term or recent activities. And I think not being active is not necessarily a sign that they are sitting it out. And contrary to that, there might be activities that when the time comes, which I don't think it's still, we are not at that phase yet. I think when the time comes, there might be activities and involvements, perhaps in ways that the public will not be able to tell the difference or even notice it. But there's going to be involvements. And part of that, for example, I'm saying that like these camera cases that are active. The other thing I can tell, again, not much to mention, is that this time I can like tell that if you're an IRGC intelligence officer or if you're a covered agent in the streets, it's not going to be a good time for you this period of time. And
because of known prepositioning that we like.
In a way, as much as I can tell. So, I'm trying to.
I get it.
Due to a certain expertise.
Due to a certain expertise
that we have. Which
even in the previous time, there has been a lot of information out there in circulation, like privately or in closed hands, or even out there literally in dark forums to purchase. So now there is much more capability and data out there in hands of the public to track you as someone who has been in the street shooting at people. There's going to be consequences, basically. And people have the means and have actually shown actively doxing these people, which I think mostly is because of all this leaked data from the past 2 years from the banks and whatnot. You can literally see that someone has a face out there, someone has a phone number or something out there, and people are in like doxing the full address and home address and parents and whatnot in just a matter of minutes over Twitter. And that's just random Joes digging random openly available databases.
Right. It is not coordinated campaigns.
Yeah. And you can imagine how worse and how more detailed and organized it will be if there's going to be an orchestration or an entity or a group or a threat actor or whatever behind it, how more cleanly and how more severe the effects can be. So this is just something to consider. That's why I'm saying it's not a good day and a good time to be in the business of shooting at people during protests.
We like that. To be honest, I'm really curious, precisely because I think as armchair quarterbacks, right, as people who are just like sitting over here in the comfort of our homes, waxing fucking lyrical and poetic about what people should do in revolutions and what, governments surely must be doing, it's really easy to be to live so much in abstraction that we miss the importance of aggregate effects. And I think that's why when you look at an organization like the CIA, or other like really well organized, well run like all source intelligence agencies, it, there's the like conceptual framing of how you understand the country, how you understand their politics, how you understand the people involved, specifics. Then there's the really important part of what is happening with the finances, what is happening with the volume of people's turning sentiment. We've talked about brain drain, we've talked about people dying, we've talked about a lack of like enthusiasm in the regime and people not even necessarily wanting to support them as much as they might have before. And it's really, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, it's really easy to think these are factors in like a binary way. Like, yes, it's a factor. It's different to say how much of it is like, what's the state of that factor from January to June to December to January 2026. Because I think that's where you determine what the regime can even do. Right? Like if we talk about like, oh, they're going softer on protesters this time, it presumes that they have the choice to go harder. And that's not to say that they don't. I'm sure that if they really want to rally, they can find some way to do something dumb.
Proven themselves capable of going harder all the time.
Well,
Juan is touching on a good point. Sorry for interrupting, Juan, but I think it's a good time to plug it. That it's not exactly and fully by choice to be softer on protest this specific time. Partly, if we look at like the U.S. administration, how they are addressing it this time, and how they
I was going to ask this. Yes.
Yeah, how they are approaching it this time. One other different aspect of it compared to the previous time was that on the previous case, it took a couple of days, and I would say even weeks, before government officials in Europe and US started actively engaging with it and like posting supporting messages and whatnot on social media and in their speeches. This time, it was full on from day one, which is an interesting observation, I think, because normally you would expect the news to spread, to build up, to get to a point that it's like a humanitarian disaster and nightmare, and then people start acting about it and tell about it and show support or whatnot. This time, even at the day one, which was very mild, peaceful, like normal protests, you would see like government officials from big countries addressing it and recognizing it, which I think is a little bit odd on its own. The other thing is, like in the US administration, there is this active, like threatening or verbal dialogue between the Iranian side and the US, is that they say, if you go aggressive on the protesters, we're going to show a response, and we are not going to see this.
You think that plays a role? Because Trump actively said this. Is like,
they said it, and then there are also cases. If you look at Iraq and Syria, there has been movements there as well. Like, I'm not sure. I'm not a military expert, and I don't know how reliable that is. But
Venezuela, they documented it. I mean, it's like, listen. We're coming, you have to get the fuck out, and then you didn't get the fuck out, and they came and they did what they had to do. How is this Trump administration like attitude playing in your mind and in Iranians' mind?
That's what I'm saying. It's not exactly or purely attitude or just words. If you look at it, there has been like actual military movements behind the borders of Iran. And what I heard, I'm not sure how reliable it is. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard also they have, like, following the Venezuela case that everyone was talking about Delta forces. I was reading in the news that they have been moved or they have been stationed in Iraq behind the Iranian borders as well. So whatever that means, there has been some military movements and placements following the threatened, like the Trump threatening the Iranian regime that if you go actively like suppressing or aggressively suppressing the protests, we are not gonna like stay silent. That's one thing. The other, I would say, message is also doing that circus thing with Maduro on like Venezuela, and then taking him out into New York and like basically showing him around in the street,
Parading
and
him
whole
in the
thing.
streets. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that part of it, I would say, was for Iran as well. To
Really?
hey, sit and watch, and I tell you why, because this might not be as much well known in our circle, I would say cyber circle, or out there at least, is that Iran has been heavily investing in Venezuela as well. So the fact that Maduro is out already, it's I would say on par, maybe not as big, but it's a very similar situation to taking down Nasrallah and like basically cutting the heads of Hezbollah and cutting Iran's hands short. Maduro's like capture was more or less the same kind of effect for Iran, at least. I'm not looking at the drug side of it, whatever that is, or whatever other operations are involved with that. We don't care, or I don't care about that part. But that was not just about drugs and cartels and whatnot. That was just not even the full cover. Like that was one of the story. And Iran has been heavily investing on a bunch of different sectors in Venezuela and trying to station themselves and route there for an unforeseen future in case they need to do something in a short period of time closer to the US soil. That would have been a prime spot, and they have been investing on that for that reason. And similar to how they assisted Russians to transfer the technology for developing Shahed drones, for example, to basically having it on full swing right now, making them independent, manufacture and use them against Ukraine. There has been efforts to do a similar thing in Venezuela as well, which is, I don't think it's covered as much, but think of that as gone as well right now, because Iran invested a lot on that. And also on the finance sector, I'm not that much reading into that, and I haven't been following, but the fact that they have also lost a station, basically, or a base in Southern America, that's also a big message on its own as well. So this is another reason that Iran might be actually taking it a little bit more serious than just public speech by Trump threatening them to don't go aggressive on Trump. These are the things to consider as well.
The oil blockade around Venezuela also will affect you significantly, right? Not you, but the Iranians significantly, right?
I would rather not talk about it because I don't have much information about that site.
So, I mean, you kind of beat me to the punch on that, Ryan. Like zooming out a little bit more, like we've kind of been trying to really, we've been discussing all of this on like Iran in internal terms. And, you know, you started to zoom out by talking about the US. The US usually, when it comes to Iran, has been largely about kind of empty threats, right? Like, don't you dare do that, or we'll do something. And then, you know, if it's sanctions, it's like whatever. The most important or realistic threat the U.S. had up until a couple of years ago, up until last year, basically, was, you know, don't do anything too bad, or we'll let Israel do what they want to do. Right? Like that was sort of like the US was always holding Israel back from doing anything too crazy in Iran. So if the Iranians do something that they disapprove of, the threat was essentially like, basically, don't let us, like, we'll let go of this leash and this pit bull is gonna, you know, tear you apart. That calculus has changed drastically in the past week. And in the, you know, I think Hamid pointed out something really important. People don't understand the level of Iranian influence in South America and how purposefully they have involved themselves with Hezbollah cells, with overt sanctions violating mechanisms, especially with like the socialism of the 21st century governments in South America over the past 20 years. You know, Argentina under the more recent Kirchner, Bolivia, Ecuador under the time of Correa, and Venezuela as the central hub of all of that. Venezuela has basically been like the money vehicle in all of these like proxy South American operations for the Russians. And for the Cubans have basically brought the like OPSEC and expertise from like an intelligence standpoint, from a security standpoint, and the Venezuelans could actually throw resources around, largely based off of the oil and this sort of like dark trade of oil and sort of rarer minerals and things that they have as like natural resources. So if you think about it as like essentially like a dark market that is composed of these sanctioned entities, right? When you sanction somebody, what you're basically saying is you're excluded from this global financial system. But if you sanction enough people, if you exclude enough people or accept enough people who will serve as bridges, um, what ends up happening is not that you're excluded from a single unitary global financial system, but instead you spawn essentially multiple international financial systems. And one that we don't acknowledge that much has been Iran, Russia, Venezuela, Cuba, as this sort of list of external countries that can still play with China, that can still play with some of the other bridges, who are very heavily trading in sanctioned oil and sanctioned money that's just not floating through the normal financial mechanisms to support things that we don't like to talk about, like Hezbollah and other countries, and buying all of these missile parts and, moving drones and like, oh, we're going to build a drone factory on the other side of the planet for you. And suddenly those things are going to appear all the way over here. And like, how did weapons from this place suddenly turn up over there? Like, there is this whole dark financial system. And this is like a very long-winded way of of agreeing with Hamid and kind of being fascinated by the introduction of this move in Venezuela as a serious like leg being chopped off of the support of this Iranian administration. Because all of a sudden, somebody that was like your heavy supporter, that had a lot of the money, that was moving a lot of, just a chunk of your financial world, which is very small, has suddenly been thrown into chaos. I doubt that they're operating the way they were before Maduro disappeared, right? So this is a particularly precarious moment for Iran. And it didn't click for me fully until we started to have this conversation. Does that sound like, Hamid, check me if I'm kind of like just waxing a little too far out? But
No, it's actually like on par with what I've been thinking about recently. And it's not just Iran, Hezbollah as well, since the like Israel basically going medieval on them. It has been also a choice, a new choice, an investment for Hezbollah as well, because they needed to source their finances one way or another. So they turned into Venezuela and drug money basically to feed their fill their financial holes. So does Iran. So that we say we don't care about the drug part, but that actually has been part of the money machine that Iran and Hezbollah has been sourcing their finances from as well. So it's not that like it's only other like economical things, investments or technology transfer and things like that. One open question that I have, if anyone can fill the gap and answer and has a better insight on it, I would love to learn, is the involvements and cooperations between Venezuela and Iran in the cyber world. Because Iran systematically and historically have been exchanging information and exchanging talent and even at operational level with some of their closer allies, like in Iraq, in Syria, in Afghanistan, with Russia. There has been some back and forth and exchanges going on the cyber capabilities domain as well. And I'm super curious if this has been the case with Venezuela as well. I don't have much information about it, but if we look at other allies and how it has been going on, I wouldn't be shocked if we learn sometime in the future that this has been the case with Venezuela as well. And then that opens another interesting rabbit holes to dig through to see how far and how effective that has been and to what end, because it's not like you need to be physically in Venezuela to do something to the US. You could just do it over the internet. If it was a neighbor country or a physical proximity, like border to border, with like Mexico, yeah, that would make more sense to connect to do something like in the cyber world that would have physical impact on your adversary as well, being the US in this case. Similar to what we observed in Palestine and Lebanon, for example, like having borders with the Israelis, they were running like terror operations, like planting bombs by someone physically crossing the border, going to a bus station in Tel Aviv, planting something while they are watching that person and recording it on the CCTV camera that they compromised on Israeli network. And this was part of the works of this recent kitten buster thing that we talked about a while back. That was literally the case of like mixing kinetic and like operation. And Amazon report also recently published about Iran mixing cyber activities and cyber operations live during the conflicts with like kinetic effects, like these Houthis. They were targeting some container or some ships sailing around that were hacked and were monitored by the Iranians. I think in a very, very short period of time. I don't remember the words from the Amazon, but the time frame was basically live operation of tracking the ships, having the live locations, and then providing it to Houthis, and then they would launch missiles against those ships. So I'm curious, what is it like between Iran and Venezuela in that domain? And that's an open question for myself.
I know,
Shout
Hamid, you
out
got
CJ
it.
Moses.
Sorry, go one.
I was just saying, shout out to CJ Moses, hardest working man in InfoSec.
Amazon Threat Intel team.
Love these guys.
Hamid, I know you got to drop soon, but I just wanted to pick your brain, and you mentioned it just very briefly, dear. Kitten Busters and its exposures of charming kittens. Since you came on the last time to now, we've seen some new episode drops. You just mentioned that information is out there identifying folks. What can you just bring us up to date on Kitten Busters, what we've seen over the last 3 months, and where they are now and how they're playing into all of this?
So I would say the most interesting thing is the thing that didn't happen directly as I was expecting until like the very recently. They had like a couple of episodes gradually releasing more details and information about it.
I think we're up to episode 5 now, right?
There, I think 4,
or maybe more.
I'm embarrassed to say that I have not engaged with any of these. Like I'm curious. I know it's interesting, but I just haven't had the time like at all. So like, Hamid, if you don't have to run right away, like what the fuck is going on that side? Yeah.
I recently talked with Grok and like on the Risky Biz podcast.
You can plug the podcast on the Risky Biz. On the Risky Biz, the second show that the Grog does. What is it called? Between Two Nerds.
Between Two Nerds. Yeah. So I went full details on about mostly Kitten Busters there, but if you don't want to go listen to all of that, I can summarize it very short. That like right now we are at the 4th episode basically that they've released on the GitHub, and what the last episode brought, which was I think super interesting, was providing evidence that some of the other threat actor groups that were previously presumed but not directly attributed or linked to Kitten Busters turned out to be Kitten Busters as well. And Moses' staff, or I don't know, someone holding something, having something, tape of naming actor groups, all of them were Kitten Busters. There's like 4 or 5 of them in the like Ibrahim Axe, Moses' staff, someone's Ding Dang. They were all in that Excel file that they published on the GitHub, and it shows that they were not only operating under their own name. And those groups are particularly interesting and important, not just because of their names, but because of the scope of the work that they were doing and the areas that they were focused on. So it looks like an internal team in their like small team focused on specific sector and types of operations, which like Moses' staff was doing, for example. Now we know that it's all under the same umbrella of IRGC Counter Intel Unit. That's one thing. The other interesting
That's what we
part,
learned from this last batch of drops, that it's
yes.
directly
So we
connected.
now have solid evidence, and you could actually log in still. Some of the credentials were still valid. You could actually literally log into like DNS provider logs, hosting provider logs, and see their previous purchase history for that specific domain or IPs and stuff that are known IOCs attributed to those groups. That's one thing. The other thing, which I think was super interesting and nicely timed with the Amazon threat intel report about kinetic effects of attacks, was that for the first time, we also have a view or evidence of a cyber operation unit presenting and demonstrating capabilities of combining cyber and kinetic effects in a way that they were publishing videos and demonstration and documents showing that the same IRGC unit that sits on top of Kitten Buster, like in organization chart, they were also presenting proof of concept UAVs that can be used to target individuals, and their goal was to deploy it in the Israel for operation. Not sure if it's been used, the same exact model or not, but there is a video of demonstrating it and also documents supporting that this is the intention of using it, literally combining these two domains together, which was interesting because I think with a day or two difference, Amazon report was also published. And then the last bit, which I just mentioned, it was an episode that I was expecting but didn't happen. I was joking on Twitter that it's a great time for Charming Kitten or Kitten Busters to actually release their episode 5, which would be focused on this aspect of combining kinetic and cyber. And I was expecting it to show up on GitHub as episode 5. It didn't. But on Iran International, very shortly after that, they published...
Iran International is a Twitter account, right?
No, Iran International is this news agency that's they are sponsored or they focus on...
I might be just thinking of another one of those fake Twitter accounts.
No, IranIntel.com. So they published an interesting story about Kitten Busters without mentioning who their source is or how they obtained it, or even talking about the Kitten Busters GitHub repository previously. They casually dropped a bunch of documents and evidence that supports exactly what I just explained to you. But it was very obvious that it's sourced from this Kitten Busters group. And it was interesting to me that this was published and they perhaps realized that nobody is tuning into a random GitHub repository to interpret this stuff. Journalists don't give a shit about GitHub and go dig a lot of raw documents to figure this out.
So it's being passed for amplification, yeah.
Yeah, I just think they just changed their PR strategy and reached out to news agencies to do a proper episode
exposure,
reporting based on raw data. And I think they did a decent job because they connected the dots nicely and they had a pretty decent coverage. I'm just going to find it and...
I'm surprised more US-based national security, cybersecurity reporters, the folks that listen to this podcast, haven't done anything on Kitten Busters and these episode drops and trying to connect it and trying to figure out what the signals are. It's not easy to go through these GitHub documents and open a spreadsheet without context. It's in Farsi and the language is different, and you're just to the rest of us, it's a drop that we can never really parse properly.
There were a couple of cases that domain tools. I think that their threat intel team also published some reports, but all of them were basically rehashing what's in the repository. And I also did an LLM-based automatic analysis with some hand manual updates of the results. But the gist of it, I already published on GitHub as well, a summary of IOCs, a summary of names and individuals and whatnot. They just did a nicer, more complete version of the same thing, basically. Nothing went full analysis deep or linked these data to other or previous historical data and operations related and attributed to these groups, which I think is still missing, and there's a lot of room for similar work. On the other hand, I also think that that chapter is already closed, because whatever meant to be exfiltrated from that network, whatever information could have been exploited and obtained from that operational group, has been already captured and exfiltrated. So it's now a matter of like strategic decision, what to do with it, when to use it, when to burn it, where to use it against Iran, for example. Because one other like subject that we discussed during this Between Two Nerds podcast was, so what's the effect of this leak to kitten busters, to charming kittens, and what happens to the people that are outed in this? And my short answer was that pretty much nothing. They get promoted, the top leaders, because they literally become the poster boys, and they just get more funded. They get more support
You
from
turn
their...
making heroes of them.
Exactly. And I know literal cases of individuals that have been promoted and have acquired budgets because of being ended up on this like most wanted FBI list or this reward for justice list. This is literally their CV that they boast about. So I don't think it's going to drastically change much. It's certainly going to have effect on them in a sense that they need to reorganize, they need to rekey. And one less spoken aspect again is that usually when these big leaks happen, there's a heavy internal effect on the individuals involved with these groups and companies and offices, because they question every single one of them very hardly and very harshly to identify the source of the leak and to figure out if there is some, I don't know, sleeper agent or something. They go medieval on them. And that on its own has a mental effect, which might be like one outcome of such leaks. But if we skip that, it's not, this leak is not going to make Charming Kitten disappear or stop from operating. The fact that they have a dedicated team of, I think, 8-9 people just for translating contents, sitting in a building, working 5 days a week, 6 days a week in Iran, should tell you how much content is in circulation, how much data is being handled and being processed, and that shows some like larger than expected operation. And one little last bit which people talked about and tried to make a big picture of it, or also this Iran International News piece tried to make a big picture of it, but I think it's like business as usual for an intel agency, is that they also leaked information about an internal system that they basically hack databases from other governments and feed it into or enrich this web interface of querying information about travel history of people, individuals, and whatnot in different countries. There was a short list of countries that they were enriching with this, but I don't think that should be the highlight of the story, because that's literally what every fucking intel agency in every fucking country does. It's like telling police carrying weapons. Duh. So I wouldn't think that's the interesting part. The interesting parts would have been mixing kinetic with cyber, and also now having like evidence connecting some other previously presumed to be independent group and actors with kitten busters. It's interesting because these two groups or these 2-3 different entities were doing different kind of operations, but now we know that they were working under the same umbrella, which was the counterintelligence unit of IRGC, and then the rest is out there to read.
Costin, you got a last question for Hamid? I think he has the bunks.
One last question for Hamid. If you were one of these other nations who are currently just staying out because they don't want to be left with the hot potato, what is, let's say, one single cyber action targeting something in Iran that would be the most impactful?
Useful.
Because we know, let's say, if they target a bank, people will get unhappy, they can't draw money. If they target electricity, people will be in the dark. If they target water, people will get upset they don't have water. But what is, let's say, one single cyber action that would help topple, change the government in Iran? What would that be?
I would say the most effective one is blinding the government, literally. And I just explained that.
Yeah. Got it.
So you are confident that is the
that
most
an expectation?
effective?
We don't know.
We'll see.
We'll see. No, Joe, like I think that's important. And I'm just gonna go out in public. If you're like another government getting into this stuff, reach out.
To you,
I'm not
Hamid?
gonna be as clear as this.
Couldn't
Yeah,
be more
just fucking
clear.
reach out, because
I mean,
this is you see a lot of random operations happening, hacking, like benefits small chunk of people, benefits small agendas, or maybe big agendas, but for specific people. But cases like this, if I was a nation state poking my finger into literally eyes of another government, I would just go after how they track people and how they're monitoring, because
Put a blindfold on them completely.
yeah, because this has an actual impact, and this literally saves lives. That's how I can word it, because that's how they track people, and that's how they got a lot of people on the previous case. And even right now, they're literally pushing propaganda media on national TV in Iran that, oh, there's a drone flying above some buildings in night, and people are chanting against the government. The drone zooms into the window, identifies the building. Someone goes and put a poster or spray like Stasi Times, labels basically the apartment door, and then the camera changes. Someone knocks the door of that building. Hey, we got you chanting against the government. Would you like to have a conversation? And then they go and sign basically like a remorse letter, or whatever the technical term for it is, that we will never do it again. And this is literally what they are pushing on national TV right now. So yeah, if there is means to do it, by all means, go poke that finger in those cameras. And frankly, it's not.
It's pokeable. They're pokeable. Let's
It's
just
literally
leave it there.
pokeables.
Miss Brother Hamid, thank you for coming on, my friend.
Cheers. Thank you for having me again.
Appreciate
And
you always.
Yeah, and I just wish this ends in a direction that we all hope, without as much disaster that we hope it will not happen. I'm just rooting for people, and I'm happy that I'm sitting where I can be of help, but I'm also not happy that I can't be there in the streets. I mean, everyone helps in a way that they can. Street is not the only way to help, as I can say.
There you go.
Cheers.
That's better words. Cheers.
Thank you
Thanks
for
a lot
having
for
me.
popping
Cheers.
on.
thanks, brother. Take care, man.
We skirted it over it. Hamid was amazing as usual. We skirted over it during the conversation with Hamid, but the big story this week obviously was Trump intimating that the lights in Caracas went blinky blink because of a certain expertise that we have, and everyone automatically jumped to cyber attack, cyber attack. New York Times even had a line in there that says described it as a cyber operation. We heard from the Venezuelans that, listen, look at the building, it's fucking blown up. So it was.
Look at the crater this cyber operation just left over here.
So what happened, Juanito?
Fuck do I mean, look, I don't know. I don't fucking know. What do you think
Did cyber makes the light go blink in Venezuela? You think there was a cyber component here? Like, what was Trump talking about when he talked about certain expertise that we have?
I'm not in the mind of the president, and I have no idea. I don't know. You also have to consider, right, that there's what we say we did and what we did, and that often is a very purposeful, if vague, misrepresentation. What I will say is, I personally doubt that cyber was the key factor in the power.
And by cyber, you mean someone clicks a button somewhere in Washington, D.C., and a light flickers off in Caracas.
But I'll say this for a very specific reason, which is that I can't. From what I understand of how the U.S. normally approaches cyber operations, I would be very surprised, or I would think of it as uncharacteristic, to see the U.S. disable power in a permanent way. Like, I don't see them essentially doing something where they lose control. I could see them doing it such that they can make sure that the thing, the power's off in the right places, and that they have the control to turn it back on, but also that they have the ability to monitor that it's still off, because you're sending people in to a very dangerous operation in denied area territory, and it's literally the lives of special forces people in your fucking hands. And you can't say, oh yeah, the power's definitely out, but we can't monitor if it's actually out. We don't know if it's being responded to, because we just kind of fried the whole thing irreversibly. I just don't see the US doing it that way. If I were to assume that the president was referring to cyber as the key thing, what I would have assumed is maybe they initially use cyber to take the power out, or to down the radars, or to blind whatever anti-aircraft stuff, like whatever it is, and then some part of the special forces goes and bombs the
A specific
substations,
substation, right?
so that they, moreover, that they knew what substations they needed to bomb, that they knew exactly where people were, that they knew that that they would show up at this place, and this was the state of the security, and this, I am dead certain that cyber was a factor in all of that. There's no shadow of a fucking doubt that cyber espionage would have played a critical role in the preparation of what, you got to give special forces credit on this, whether you agree with what just happened or not. We just fucking magicked ourselves into a country and took literally the most important person in the entire
out of the
place
army headquarters,
alive. Just vanished them overnight in Nike Tech PJs. I understand that people have strong thoughts and feelings about whether we should do this, but I do think we need to take just 2 seconds to be the Russians and other people must have been like, yo, it's just it's such a fucking crazy thing to do, that you have the ability to do that.
right?
Not
right.
just not, dude,
And that's
we
where
didn't.
cyber came in, right? They had to have been a complete pawnage of Venezuelan networks. The CIA was rampantly operating there. I mean,
Yeah.
Trump was openly saying that the CIA is on the ground long before this operation.
I mean, look, yes, though, again, to make sure that we're not kind of over-aggrandizing the cyber, we're trying to address the fact that the president sort of made this opaque reference that we read as it being about cyber, and I'm dead certain that cyber, and probably CIA cyber, as not just Cyber Command or whatever, must have been involved heavily in a lot of the information that enabled this. But especially if you're talking about CIA being involved, I don't think they're taking these decisions on the basis of cyber alone. You're making these decisions with high, well-placed assets and very immediate, very real, very the kind of, look, guys, this country, you can think whatever you want about the intelligence community. You might hate spies, you might disagree with what people do, but the way the US does intelligence is holding itself up to such a rigorous standard that it doesn't always play that way. There are mistakes. There's always an asshole that does things wrong, blah 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 blah.
Still, the standard.
No, still, I think so. I mean, obviously, you have a lot of brain drain, you have a lot of people leaving, you have whatever, but the way that these organizations train people and the processes they try to have, we can complain all day about them being too timid, too pussyfooting, too politically risk averse.
A lot of that is the bureaucracy and the system.
But a lot of that is the bureaucracy, and you always have to remember, and people always, people forget this. There's very little meaningful decision making that's happening inside of the intelligence community. The intelligence community serves very much as an arm of the executive, of the president, and these very high level folks, and they will often they would rather die than be the ones who chose to do a thing instead of the president or whomever is actually in charge getting choices and saying, Mr. President, we can go with this, this, or this, and this is what we think the right choice is. But they're very they bear the brunt of a lot of outcomes, oftentimes outcomes that they have no control over, and sometimes over outcomes that they did have some involvement in but didn't make the decision for. So sorry, I guess this is like a very sort of out of nowhere defense of the IC, but it's more to say that with that in mind, I think we need to take a minute to like just marvel at what just happened from an intelligence standpoint and from an operational standpoint, what Delta Forces can do. This is insane to go into a military dictatorship that is expressly hostile against you and take the highest placed decision maker out of the country alive with his wife. Like, you didn't just drop a bomb somewhere. You literally took him. It's insane. But I also don't think that cyber was everything.
You think they had a lot of inside help?
Oh, absolutely. Without a shadow of a doubt. Like, without a shadow of a doubt. I'm not saying that everybody was against the king, right? But like, without a shadow of a doubt, there were important, long-term developed human assets. And I really doubt that they would ever make the decision to send, special ops into such a tricky mission, such a mission with such potential for embarrassment. And like, dude, if something had gone wrong, like, look at how we're all reacting to it going right. Imagine if it had gone wrong. Imagine if they got Maduro in one of those helicopters and it gets blown up.
When he's dancing on it, or he's dancing on it to techno music, right? Like, because that was his thing
serious,
right before.
Bro, come on! Like, imagine if the U.S. had shown up, had picked him up in his PJs and his wife, put him in a fucking helicopter, and then it got blown up by some random Venezuelan military dude.
Oh, I thought no. Imagine the helicopter crashes and Maduro gets a hold of it and jumps on top of it and starts dancing. That's what I'm talking about.
It's not a Sora universe. I'm just saying there was such potential for horrendous, like, Bay of Pigs style embarrassment to befall us. So yes, I don't really think this was all cyber. Like, I'm sure cyber played a really big role. I'm sure this was one of those where you pulled out every fucking trick in the book and you made dead fucking certain that nothing was gonna go wrong before you were even willing to say, yeah, we can do this. Because this shit is insane.
Venezuela's state-owned oil company Petróleos de Venezuela claimed they also suffered a cyber attack at the hands of the U.S. There was like some mirrors of it might have been ransomware, la 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 la. It makes sense that this would be part of that operation though, right? Like, owning all these oil companies makes the most sense. And I bring this up because have you guys been following the work of Christian Trebert and the New York Times visual investigations teams? Because what he's doing, he's tracking all the tankers trying to escape the blockade and all the formations. Like at one point last week, they all left at the same time to try to, I don't know what, outmaneuver and get past the blockade. And they've been tracking these ships and U.S. boarding a lot of these ships and chasing these ships for weeks around the world and so on. You have to imagine that there's a he's doing it using Bellingcat type skills, which is amazing in itself. But you have to imagine there's a lot of interest in owning these petroleum companies and state-owned oil companies for that purpose. Just to figure out where the oil is, who's going where. Well,
I'm sure it could be a factor, but I am not sold on the idea that that cyber attack on PDVSA was actually a U.S. action. I'm not saying it could not be.
By the way, somebody called you to task for your comments on this story last week. I saw on Twitter, someone says, according to Juan, if it's ransomware, it's bullshit. But if it was a nation state, then it would have been amazing.
No. It's not that whether it's ransomware, it's bullshit. If it's a nation state, it would have been amazing. It's more that, like, I am not willing to assume that this was nation state as opposed to a random act of ransomware or criminality or even just incompetence, like somebody, like a bunch of fucking drives failing or some network setting going wrong, and somebody going, oh, that was the imperialist Yankees, which is what they blame. That's what they literally blamed Hugo Chavez's cancer on the Yankee imperialists, right? So I don't take their reporting seriously as to what the attribution would be. Period. Now, if it were that the US did this, super fucking interesting, right? Like this would be the first time that I can think of that we would see that kind of like a flashy operation, that sort of like overt disablement, the use of ransomware by, like, we have been condemning the use of ransomware by other nation states nonstop for the past, like, what, 2-3 years, as we see, WannaCry was like obviously the big example, but like we have been condemning that shit. So to say that the US suddenly did it to a state oil company, an arm of another government, like I'm just saying that there's a lot of firsts and a lot of like, it's just so unusual that I think the bar is placed way higher than some random report from PDVSA in a country that will blame anything. Food shortages, the power went out yesterday.
Are we questioning that there was a cyber attack at all?
I mean, look, I haven't seen, I'm not saying it never happened. I'm just saying that it being this like shitty an information space, I need to see more before I'm really going to be like, yes, this definitely happened. And yes, this probably was the US. Like, no, I don't know. You guys have been fucking lying for 20 years. Every day. Like, Hugo Chavez and Maduro have had a tradition of going on television every weekend for 3 hours to talk about every problem in the country. And like, 60% of those
like
were caused
right?
by the US. Yeah.
You have a Friday radio show like us.
Yeah, exactly. Some fucking idiots on a podcast. Yeah.
Wait a second. Costin, you and I always say IOX, or it's all marketing bullshit.
Exactly.
Are we saying PDVSA is like all marketing here, or are there places you can go and potentially find IOX that says, wait, an actual cyber attack did happen?
There's no place where you can go and find them, but I know people who have seen the IOX, and those IOX do not look like anything that was previously known. So it's not like one of these big ransomware groups. It's not Black Cat. It's not Gentleman's Ransomware. It's nothing of sorts.
It's custom?
I don't have like all the details, so I can't speak with the direct first-hand knowledge, but they don't look like anything known. So are they the US? I don't know. But
how are you gonna let
known.
me say all that shit and you've actually heard about actual
It's a Friday
IOCs?
radio show, man.
It's a
It's
Friday
a Friday radio
This
show.
motherfucker, I'm just here like spinning up this like giant fucking tall tale
I'm
about
here like
why.
in a corner. Look,
The man is sitting on the
Bro,
IOX.
say something. Fucking say some shit.
you want me to drop the IOX?
Yeah, you're killing me here, man. Like,
No, I think, by the way, the other thing which I fully agree with you is that I think that cyber played a very important role in this story. It may have not been the primary thing which brought Maduro from Venezuela, from Caracas to the New York prison, but there was one thing which I thought was relevant to the story, that the power was off, and then I think the general who spoke together with Trump,
General Kane, Dan Kane,
General
yes.
Kane, correct. So General Kane said something really interesting. He said that Maduro had a panic room ready with a huge blast
Steel
door,
door.
like
Yeah.
17 centimeters, inches, whatever, and they were ready to blow it and kill Maduro if needed. But because the lights were out in Caracas, the door didn't work, so he couldn't
Electric
close the
powered door.
it was an electric power door, and the power was off, and they knew that he was gonna try to hide there. So I wonder if they actually had to knock off power, not necessarily to blind people, to make it dark, to
Just
make
literally
it
to keep the door open.
to keep the door open so they can actually capture Maduro in his residence, so they don't have to kill him with a blast that blows 17 inches thick doors.
but bro, think about the intelligence, the level of penetration of another government that you know not just what the procedure, what the process, what the size of the fucking door is gonna be, but that you even know what the right substation and power mechanism is that's gonna disrupt that. Because like if that shit had been connected to a fucking Tesla battery, like yeah, you can take down the whole fucking power. The dude is still behind a giant fucking wall. I'm just marveling at it. Like to me, this like I know that this is not the way that decisions are made, and that this has nothing to do necessarily with what we're looking at, but it almost feels like the CIA and you know the U.S. military watched the Israelis take a fucking like victory lap last year and take the fucking award for best decisive intelligence operation of all time with their
With the beeper
golden
thing.
beepers,
Yeah.
and we're like this was like their hold my beer moment. Like yeah, that was you think that's cool? Like let's
There's
go
been a lot of
fucking
reporting over the last months prior to this about how royally owned the Venezuelan infrastructure was. I'm looking at an October 29th story here on CNN.com written by Sean Lingus, who we know very well.
friend.
oh yeah.
Kylie Atwood and Katie Bowl-Lillis that says cyber CIA had basically infiltrated the computer network used by Maduro's intelligence service for like throughout the final year of the Trump's last administration. He was not happy with the extent of it going into it. So, I mean, one other point I want to make on the electricity shutdown is like, in the best of times, these things don't work. Like these people are dealing with rolling blackouts on a nightly basis anyway because of the economic situation there. So like when we talk about blackouts and having like a kill switch to turn off the lights, it's like in many cases, kinetic is what actually is the only thing that actually works.
So absolutely. I will also okay. So let me point something out there that I think is important to keep in mind, and I realize now in the context of the conversation we were having with Hamid, folks who are not as avid in watching some of these countries might not be as aware, but the ultimately nobody takes the Venezuelans seriously in their security apparatus. The SEBIN is not necessarily like the cream of the fucking crop when it comes to intelligence.
Did he import Cubans
but-
to
Well,
manage
and
most?
here you go, and that was going to be my point. This actually
Sorry.
speaks more. No, it's fine. To the failure of the Cuban intelligence services, like
Because they lost 25 people, or
I'm sure
I
they
don't know
did.
what the number
and
is.
that's-
Yeah.
And that just goes to show like how many of the people directly surrounding Maduro were Cuban intelligence operatives. Like the DGI, like they were super involved in training these intelligence agencies and the security apparatuses of these particular governments in Latin America. And so were the Russians. And it's really fucking interesting that neither of those, nor the Chinese, who are heavily financially invested in the natural resources of Venezuela, like for 30 years out, none of them had the either strategic wherewithal or the willingness to somehow sabotage this operation or somehow essentially put a stop to it or leak it or whatever. Like imagine this is like either we are seeing a moment of grand conspiracy between the biggest powers in the world, which I'm not claiming that this is the case, but I'm saying from in the decision space, you are either seeing that the three most powerful countries in the world sat down and basically divided up and said, we're going to take this, you take that, nobody fuck with each other, right, goodbye. Or we just witnessed an insane intelligence failure on the parts of both Russia and China and Cuba in not having somehow sabotaged, leaked, or stopped that this was going on.
It's incredible how secret this remained from the beginning to the very. It was just incredible to wake up in the morning and look at this news and to realize the extent of what happened. Interestingly, Costin.
Sorry, one last shitty throwaway comment. It's incredible that we could literally keep this operation a secret, and we haven't been surprised by an Apple product in like 6 years.
Apple got a stray just out of nowhere.
Just saying, man.
Listen, I noticed that there isn't much reporting, and again, this is a call out to our security reporting friends on what could have and could not have happened here in Venezuela on the cyber side. However, we did get a research out of Anti Labs, a private Chinese cybersecurity company. Anti-Cert published a research report that actually analyzed what the cyber components could have looked like, how it could have happened, how historically the US handles these kinds of operations, merging cyber and kinetic. Costin, what do you read? Do you read anything at all into a Chinese private company publishing this? And actually, it's actually pretty detailed. It was actually a fun little read.
Yeah, it's a big report. It's pretty large. Whenever you read such reports, you need to be careful and mindful of one thing, that they could be either something legitimate, it can be something really bad, or it can be state propaganda. Now, if you translate this report, the first thing that you notice is obviously there's no IOCs, there's like no actual description of any known cyber attack that happened. It's almost all about what could have happened, so what might have happened, conjecture, assumptions, kind of lessons learned, more in the line of what we need to do, like in order to prepare so that we don't face the same fate as Maduro. So it's more along the lines of, let's say, a defensive posture and how to get ready and what kind of tool sets might have been used. But again, I didn't see any legitimate IOCs. I didn't see any kind of actual information from the grounds from Venezuela. And I know there's actually been a lot of discussion about cyber happening in Venezuela before the attack. So starting in December of last year, there was a lot of interest from journalists checking out, if anyone has heard about cyber attacks, about pre-positioning, about passive implants, about 0 days, about ICS malware. So very specific questions and a large amount of questions about this. But at the same time, nothing technical, no visibility, obviously, from almost anyone. I did look into our telemetry just out of curiosity to understand what's happening.
Our meaning what? TLP Black, your company.
Our TLP Black, correct. And it would appear to me, like in terms of antivirus EDR solutions, what's running in Venezuela nowadays. It used to be many years ago. It used to be Kaspersky thing. It used to be ESET. What appears to be the most popular antivirus at the moment seems to be Avast. This is what it looks like. So if there's anyone who might have visibility into such happenings, I guess it would be the products that are most popular in Venezuela. According to our visibility, Kaspersky was insignificant in terms of deployment in these networks. So I would assume it would be some of the others. And obviously,
maybe some Chinese too.
Those companies. No, I'm not seeing any like Chinese. Again, with our visibility, I'm not seeing any signs of Chinese security solutions being deployed in Venezuela.
During your time in GRIP, did you cover any APT discoveries with victimology in Venezuela? Do you remember offhand?
So I did some research, I think, or at least on public materials over the years. So what's been publicly available from websites, from everybody. And there have been mentions, there have been notices of different APT groups active in Venezuela, but very, very little, very few. And at least me, I haven't been able to find any signs of US-centric activity it was mostly other things. I think that Careto maybe was
Yeah.
active there. Was it
Yeah.
the Puppeteer group?
Puppeteer Group was heavy. Like Puppeteer Group had
Chaplain.
the entire like Sevin like intelligence agency there.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, definitely there's a lot of interest in Venezuela. That said, I don't know that there's been a lot of reporting about things in Venezuela. Some of it would be just a matter of visibility, right? Like how much visibility are you actually getting into any of those networks? And then the people who are, how willing are they to share? But there's no way, like, just think of it as like from a strategic importance standpoint. You may think of Venezuela as some kind of like podunk place, but it's the biggest oil repositories, one of the most problematic sanctioned nations, one of the proxy arms of Russia in our hemisphere, and also a belligerent against not just the US, but other nations, a critical natural resources extraction project for the Chinese, right? Like there's so many different geopolitical interests that intersect. Oh, I mean, look, I know that we don't want to necessarily validate the discussions about the drug trade, but yes, Venezuela has been a heavy part of the narco economies of South America over the past like 20 years, and like meaningfully so. And so
When you say
that's
Venezuela, you mean the Venezuelan administration, the Venezuelan government, the country as a whole? Like, would you just say Venezuela has been?
well, I mean, look, it's very difficult. Obviously, I just mean the regime, but the
Okay.
regime has been in power for a long fucking time. Like most of the people who have ever been in opposition to the Venezuelan regime are either dead or in Miami. Like
Right. Or in
that,
prison, currently in prison, right?
yeah. Like there's everybody has gotten displaced. They have been very effective about subverting any kind of democratic processes. They look what people don't understand, and it was even hard for me to understand because I'm not even old enough to really have properly experienced this, is that Venezuela was the most developed, are arguably the most developed nation in South America
With
for
a
a
very
time.
deep, rich history of democracy and elections and changing
Yeah.
administrations and all of this stuff. Like it
Yeah,
was,
like-
it was very, very. It was held up when I was a kid. It was
Yeah.
held up as like a paragon.
Dude, it was like PDVSA. It's kind of funny because you see this oil company was like this crown jewel that was developed actually by like Georgetown and Harvard educated people, and it meant that it really did bring insane riches to this place and helped it develop. They had a very sophisticated culture, and within South America they were seen as like the rich folk. Like they would come to other countries, and I can't remember, like there was some catchy name the Colombians used to call them, like dame dos or something, like where they would just look at something and be like, oh, it's that cheap, I'll take two, right? Like that was sort of the view of Venezuelans. And to see that, like that paragon of sort of wealth and affluence and sophistication for South America turn into like a humanitarian crisis. We don't have medication, we don't have food, kind of societal collapse over 20 some years is so stark as to be like, it just makes your head spin, right? It's just too much. A big part of that was also the turning towards sort of this narco economy, the involvement of paramilitaries, the FARC, the involvement of Iranian influences. Like there is a lot of history that's been going down over there that folks have, all of a sudden everybody's now also a Venezuela expert. Thank you. You migrated from Russia, China. Maybe that's why we have no reports on like Iran right now. But I think there's a lot there to discuss that just doesn't seem to be a part of the conversation right now.
Costin, we're going to close the show in a little bit, but I want to know how this is playing in Europe. Like, how is this playing in your world? Is this top news? Like, what's the European correspondent?
Is there some strong monitoring? Are there some sternly worded letters being drafted right now?
Look, we need to acknowledge the people who are like really upset about this, in the sense that they were crying about the president, legitimate president of a sovereign nation being kidnapped from his home and taken to another country. So there's people complaining about it, including in Europe. I think Russia was complaining. I think China was complaining. Some maybe former U.S. presidential candidates were complaining. I don't know, some mayors of certain cities. But in general, in Europe, Europe. Europe is never
Actively
black or white.
monitoring the situation.
Exactly, and we've always said that the government is legitimate, but we are concerned about the breach of international law.
You didn't tell us you were concerned.
I'm not concerned, not me. Europe is. Certain people are concerned, right? And to be honest, the whole thing, like you said, it was just mind blowing to watch. And I was telling my wife, like, they invaded U.S. invaded Venezuela, and they took Maduro out, and like it was everything was done in 30 minutes, and the whole operation lasted 2 hours and a half. It was like just mind blowing.
Hold up.
Everything is just mind blowing. And of course, the other question is, can they do the same in Iran? Is it like on the table? What's next? For sure, this is going to have some repercussions for Russia, and we see it happening now. There's a lot of discussion about these Venezuelan oil tankers that suddenly changed their flag to Russia. They're like not Venezuela, they're Russia now. And Russia sent submarines to defend them, but the U.S. used helicopters, so like
and boarded them anyway. Yeah.
Don't bring a submarine to a helicopter fight. I don't know.
There's some U.S.-Russia conflict brewing in that kind of world of sanctions, oil being trying to slip past the embargo. Some of them putting Guyana flags on them. Suddenly, U.S. was boarding things with Guyana flags misnamed.
And Guyana has a border with Venezuela, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Not only a border with Venezuela, heavily disputed border with Venezuela that Venezuela claims 2/3 of Guyana. So there's a big, giant border conflict there. That's why in Guyana, it's a big celebration that Trump removed Maduro, because he had been using this threat of invasion of Guyana as kind of like a nationalistic rallying cry at home. So for his own domestic politics.
Look
so
at all these poor people who just like signed in for a fucking podcast on cyber and some cyber news and a lot of cursing and maybe shitting on Microsoft or something, and instead they have gotten all the geopolitical like Iran, Venezuela, Guyana.
What are we trying to do?
Cuba.
We
Hey,
try to
how's
be another
Romania doing
podcast.
these days? Or like,
No, but like seriously, a lot of
Sorry, Ryan.
Some of the articles I have seen, guys, they were, and Cuba could be next. I've seen articles in the Romanian media, like very worried that Cuba might be next. And I was like, what?
I remember
How
the
much
days.
oil is in Cuba, honestly, like seriously.
I remember the good old days of watching Romanian elections being cancelled and being like, we're democracy experts now. Now we're geopolitical oil embargo busting experts, and people listen to this shit show just for that. Sorry to the people.
Yeah, we've been telling you we wouldn't fact check,
But there's, by the way, there's an interesting angle in this whole story, which is Cuba, because allegedly all the intelligence in Venezuela and all the security forces, apparently they were all trained by Cuba, and this alleged bomb-proof safe or vault room where Maduro was supposed to go, that was all set up by Cuba. And apparently all those Cuban intelligence officers who were involved in the operation, they were all on the payroll of the CIA or owned with multiple tools and systems and, marketing stuff.
I mean, if they were owned by the CIA, it would be a really big statement on of the quality of the DGI and how to what degree they would have declined, which I'm not saying couldn't happen. A lot has changed in Cuba in the past, 5-6 years. But I think I would find it really notable if that was the case, as opposed to them being owned and like being, sort of, there's a reason so many of them died along the way, right? Like I can't see, with the history that those Cuban services have, where they've literally spied effectively and successfully within the United States. I would be really surprised if any part of the intelligence of the U.S. intelligence community would be willing to trust anything coming out of DGI people in Venezuela.
Usually what follows these things when cyber is involved, we'll get a month down the road, we'll get a David Sanger blow-by-blow piece in the New York Times, or Ellen Nakashima will do something in the Washington Post. Are you guys expecting something on Venezuela, or we think the whole cyber component there was largely overblown? What's our last word conjecture on it?
I think it's just right now it's mischaracterized. I think, everybody, there's this pointing to cyber being important, and there is this perception that what the only important operations when it comes to cyber are kinetic. So what we get is this very quick reporting about how important basically cyber kinetic operations were in this thing. So I think right now it's just like fog of war, early distortion, not helped by how ambiguous some of the commenting has been around it. But if we do get, and I hope we do get, some blockbuster, amazing reporting from whomever that explains the actual role of cyber, my money, my polymarket bet would be on it was crucial in an espionage sense, but I would be very surprised if it had any actual kinetic component that was meant to be for the whole of the operation, as opposed to just an early enabler, right? Like, you do the radars and like anti-aircraft shit, like we've seen it in Syria, like we've been told that it happened in Iraq. It's happened in multiple places, and it's been done by the Israelis and other folks. But I don't think that was what you relied on if you're telling me that you literally needed that power to stay off, or you would not have been able to grab the principal target of the entire operation. There's a reason they blew those fucking substations up.
Fair enough. Costin, you agree?
It's complicated times, and I was just remembering the Romanian Revolution in December of 1989. I forgot to ask Hamid how cold it is actually in Tehran.
It is. I checked. It is
cold, right?
Last night it was in the 20s. Well, 20s for us is like New York, brutal winter
New York
cold.
cold, huh?
Yes.
And this was actually the thing that toppled Ceausescu in Romania. It was cold. People were hungry, and they just couldn't take it any longer. And that, and the fact that Ceausescu went and he tried to deliver some kind of a speech, and then people saw that he was weak. So I wonder if any of the leaders in Iran, maybe the Ayatollah or whoever,
remembers
if they
that
make
lesson.
a speech, and in that speech they seem weak, I wonder if that will be the end. And the other thing that I wanted to ask was like, what's going on with Tucker Carlson on national TV in Iran being broadcasted over and over for hours? Like,
is it?
What?
First time I'm hearing of this.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Is it a particular episode, or is it just like Tucker Carlson 24/7? Like,
I wanted to ask.
How do we get the three-body problem in on that?
Bro, yeah. What kind of bow ties do we need to start wearing?
We have listeners in Iran, according to the data, so who knows? Costin, close the show with some shout-outs. We're 2+ hours in.
Hey, look, you know me, I'm the positive guy here, and I just can't not say it. Now I want to remind you all that this famous Bulgarian seer, this famous Bulgarian Cassandra Baba Vanga, she predicted that in 2026, two major things will happen. The aliens will finally come, and an alien spaceship will enter the Earth atmosphere, and the Third World War will begin. So,
how high am I?
Very positive.
How high are you?
like, because I mean, usually I have a hard time with the aliens, but we're talking about
What's the name of the
a
person?
psychic,
Baba Gana?
a
Oh,
fucking
you don't know
a
Baba
Bulgarian,
Vanga?
a
Baba
Bulgarian
Vanga.
psychic has said,
She's famous, like absolutely
the f-
famous blind seer who predicted like many things.
I cannot
Juanito,
wait for the feedback on this episode. It's gonna be
Juanito,
fucking
close the show with some
phenomenal.
shout outs, please.
I don't even know what the fuck is going on, man. I don't know. I didn't think that far.
I
I'm
agree.
still waiting for the cyberings. Look, it's critically fascinating times. I think Costin has always kind of jokingly appropriated this, what is it, Chinese curse of like, may you live in interesting times. We are living in truly interesting times. And I understand that that's normally a curse, and I don't want to make it seem. Don't let me sound glib. It's just that I can't afford right now to be depressed. So instead, let me lean into being an intelligence analyst at heart and an avid watcher of the world and commentator of the world, and to say that we have been we've grown tired and exhausted by some intransigent circumstances, some things that we all know suck and just have not changed or only gotten worse for decades. And that was this kind of like constant groan and moan of everybody of like everything just, what's the saying about millennials? Like we watched a bunch of people like blow up and die in two towers when we were in middle school, and everything has gone downhills from there. That's really, if that is the feeling that we've had, then let's at least take some solace in that what felt like an intractable, unshakable, shitty circumstance is suddenly a hotbed of change. Does that mean it's going to be good? Does that mean it's trending towards the better? I don't know. I really don't know, because frankly, the strictures, the structures, the rational decisions, the red lines, the things that people would never do clearly don't apply anymore on a variety of levels. And people are right to be shook, if not downright scared, because, when there's change, it's scary, right? You don't know what's going to come. You don't know what protections are. But I would at least remind us, just for the, like, honestly, desperately trying to be optimistic, that we were really bummed out that nothing would change. Right now, a lot seems to be changing. Let's just hope it can be for the better. Like that's my takeaway here on a Friday, right?
Can I add one thing as a parent of a millennial is that you guys are so fucking dramatic. Like this shit.
What?
I want to make a point here. That this shit happens in every generation. Every generation has got its like badass superpower, walks in and does whatever he wants. We had this Maduro issue that you're marveling at. Amazing project. They did this with Noriega in Panama, to the point where he ran to the, people are not old enough to remember him running into the Vatican embassy in Panama, and the U.S. Marines putting speakers outside the Vatican embassy playing heavy metal rock and roll music just to annoy the hell out of them to get him out. And we went in and took Noriega for the same crimes of drug trafficking. So this stuff happens all the time. Every generation goes through these dramatic, massive changes. At the time, it feels like, oh my God, the world is turning. Yeah. It's just a blip. Like this is just a tiny blip in how generation and how the world works.
Look,
don't let this thing get...
At the risk of playing into what the characterization that you're saying, no, look, we do have a penchant for the dramatic, and I do think it is based on that notion of like, we saw some fucked up shit very early on, and then it's just been fucked up shit all the way through. But I think the one key point is that change has been accelerating. Everything in modern society has been accelerating. We used to see events like that, whether it's like the refugee crisis in like whatever, like Argo in Iran, or Noriega, the Contras,
Darfur, and some of the genocidal things.
Nixon, yes, but it wasn't every other week. Like we have been seeing.
Yeah, but we live in
you know,
a social media generation, though. I mean, like, isn't it
but
because
it's not
much
fabricated.
amplified?
It's not like it's a social media generation in the sense of like we are making up problems.
No, what I'm saying is
where
this shit happens all the time. It's now just like rammed into our face all day on text and everything. It just feels
we're definitely hyper connected, and like you become aware of things very quickly, and of course flooded, overwhelmed by things. But there's also a lot of things. Like that's the thing that we need to admit, that is very different. Before, the time of like my grandparents, there was a lot less news.
But there wasn't there weren't less things happening. The same number of things happened.
There were less things happening, bro. Like there were less.
Dude,
there
your
were
grandparents went through World War II. Your grandparents went
Not
through like the whole
exactly,
rewriting of the world. You're like, come on.
It took my grandfather 3 months to get from
millennials,
Lebanon to Ecuador.
You millennials
He did
think
not
your
know-
generation is the most special, where everything is only happening to
look,
you. Stop
No,
it.
I think we millennials think that we millennials just feel burdened by the kind of the perception of the horrors around us. I get it, but I think that from a true like if we are being objective, if we get away from the characterizations of boomers and millennials or whatever the fuck it is, because it's funny, but then it becomes not very helpful. I think from an objective standpoint of watching societal development, acceleration is reaching a peak, and it's not just about interconnectivity. It's not that we're just more aware. Like you're right. There are parallels for these things
All the time. Every generation.
Dude, the Saudis with like I can't remember which Lebanese president literally taking him hostage and making him essentially abnegate the presidency. That was
Didn't
within
the
the past
Israelis
2
drive up
decades.
to Yasser Arafat's door at one point with like tanks outside of his door? Like,
I'm just saying that kind of meaningful event, like that meaningful aberration, was happening at a much wider distribution. It's happening all the fucking time now. We just did that in Venezuela, and like we're barely dwelling in Venezuela. We're already talking about, is it going to be Cuba or Greenland next? You're like, bro, the crater isn't even, it hasn't stopped smoking yet, and you're already like, so what the fuck are we doing now? Like, it's crazy.
You were supposed to close the show with a shout out, bro.
Oh, right. Yeah. No. Look. Shout out. I'm just, guys. I am in no way saying I agree with what happened, or that I necessarily am cool with this or whatever. But shout out to whatever fucking genius tacticians, strategy people, special operations people, like nerves of steel motherfuckers, and intelligence officers made that happen. That was not easy. That was not something even the best of people, the greatest operators of all time, must look at this operation with respect. This shit was truly insane. I know that we're rushing to express our sentiments about whether this is legal, whether this is advisable, whether it was a good choice, what the fuck is going to happen. Like, there's all kinds of important societal things for us to discuss. But I do think we need to take just a minute as admirers and just say, holy shit, it's insane that there are people alive among us that can do this, that can pull this off, as Costin said, in 2 hours to change the course of an entire country, and probably more than one.
Fair enough. I'll just do some quick business. I want to thank Threat Locker for sponsoring the show last month, showing support for Three Body Problem, and to the folks at Material Security who will be sponsoring the Three Body Problem through the end of January this year. So shout out to Threat Locker and the folks at Material Security. If you're in business and you're looking for the services those companies provide, there'll be some advertising on the top and at the bottom of this podcast.
Not
Gentlemen,
geopolitical services, right? I imagine.
No
This isn't-
geopolitical services. Gentlemen, thank you very much. We'll talk again next week.
Baka, baka.
Peace.